Greetings, everyone. Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to another edition of Ranking the Albums. Today, in the co-captain's chair, once again, Steven Reid, fellow writer from Sea of Tranquility for many, many years. Welcome back, Steven. What's going on? How are you doing today?
I'm doing very well today. Another exciting and difficult assignment. These are great fun. I love doing this. This is excellent.
Exactly. Well, this one was your idea, so you can blame yourself for that. So,
that's
yes.
true. I gave this to both. So that's
in all honesty, though, we're doing the ranking of the Threshold catalog today. So a great, long-standing veteran progressive metal band from the UK. We've actually had a lot of people ask for Threshold. And then Steve and I, when we were talking about some bands to do, he's like, how about we do some Threshold? And I'm like, why don't we? So,
absolutely.
And right before we went on air, I said to Steve, I said, this was damn near impossible. And I'll tell you why it was impossible, because this band has such a consistently high output from their first album to their most recent album.
Yep.
How do you they're one of those bands that's like, I never actually said that's my favorite Threshold album, or those are my two favorite Threshold albums. It's like they're all favorites. It's like, a lot of bands that you love over the course of your life, you always have a favorite or a least favorite. I can honestly say that in knowing these guys since they first came out and going over the catalog over the last 2 weeks, there's not a bad album here.
Yep.
Almost nothing separates any of them, no matter, and they've got different singers all throughout the catalog.
Well,
it's like it doesn't matter. Well, different say coming and going. There's what, three of them?
Threshold are the tale of three singers.
Yes, exactly. But it's not like you had Damian Wilson for 4 straight albums, and then Mac for 5 albums, and then I forget the other guy, Glenn. It's like they kind of came and went throughout the whole catalog. And I think that has lent to the catalog this feeling of variety from album to album to album, but yet every album is so great.
One of the interesting things that listening to an interview, I think it was with Damian Wilson quite a while back, is that he views the band very much as it's not the singer who writes the vocal melodies. So that is the guitarist and keyboard players. That's Richard West and Carl Groom.
Right.
So I think that's allowed a continuity. I agree. They evolve, and sometimes they evolve forward and backwards. However, there's a continuity there. And interestingly, I think less Damian Wilson than the other two, they actually sound very different and very similar. And that's quite clever songwriting. But I think that it's also, there's been issues with Threshold, within Threshold. I don't think that you have 3 different singers who've all had at least, well, Mac had 1 tenure, but the other 2 have had 2 or 3. They both had 3 tenures with the band. I mean, that's, who else can say that? That's very, very unusual. And Damian Wilson said a few things, as did Mac. Mac didn't leave on the best of terms either, interestingly. And I think it's possibly because they're not allowed to write songs very much. But that's possibly been a strength of the band, but not a strength within the band.
Right. And not very common when you talk about bands of this ilk, right? I mean, Dream Theater to an extent. I'm wearing a Dream Theater shirt, so the first thing that came to mind. There you go. That's a very cool shirt. James LaBrie writes very little in the band. He's written his share, but that's mostly been kind of protected or taken over by, in the old days, Petrucci and Portnoy.
Yep.
Nowadays, mainly Petrucci with a little bit of John Mayung and God, I'm drawing a complete blank on their keyboard player's name.
Jordan Rudess.
Rudess, that's right. So, and a lot of other progressive metal bands, you can kind of see some similarities, but you're absolutely correct with Threshold. It's those 2 guys, it's Groom and West from the beginning. And there is a specific formula and flavor to almost every album. And that's not to say that the formula is not good, because it's damn good. It works. What's the old saying? If it ain't broke, don't fix it, right?
What it's allowed them to do, unusually in a genre that can, and I'm a fan of the genre, that can at times be too similar from band to band. There's too many bands that are maybe quite happy to read a review where it says that they pull from Dream Theater and they pull from Symphony X.
Right.
Threshold sound like Threshold. They're a progressive metal band. You can't, confuse it for anything else. But they sound like Threshold.
Right.
And that's a massive compliment that has to be said. And I think that they would probably have been quite protective about that. The fact that they've managed to create something of their own within a genre that is difficult to do that, why would you then dilute it? So I can see why they would maybe have done what they've done.
Yeah. And, they came about, back on the Wounded Land album, which Wounded Land was 1994. So that was just a couple of years after the big break of Dream Theater. And even from that first album, they were never a Dream Theater clone, where I could think of a ton of other bands
Yeah.
who kind of came in that wake and sounded a lot like Dream Theater, because how could you not? And yeah, they've had, just like you said, they sound like Threshold. They don't sound like anybody else, and nobody else sounds like them. So that's a good thing. So,
very good thing.
But it makes it hard to separate some of these albums and put them in some kind of order. Very hard. And so, like I said, this was almost near impossible to me. And I think if we were to do this, like we're going to do today, and maybe say in a month, let's revisit again, we'd probably come up with different order. I think I would, because it's like kind of like, which one's doing more for me today, so to speak. You know what I'm saying?
That's a very good way of putting it. Yes,
right?
Very much so.
So with that, let's kick it off, right? So we have 11 studio albums in total here. And I'm going to let Steven kick it off with his least favorite of the 11. And again, I'm using that term very loosely today because,
absolutely, yeah.
I mean, come on, how can you not like any of these? There's no not liking any of them, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're starting off. So there's going to be a theme here. This is a great album. Okay, so this is Wounded Land.
Ah, okay.
Okay, so we're in 93, I think we said 94 there, but 93 I've got written down. So we're about there. We're early to mid 90s. This is the band's debut. This has got Damien Wilson on it. And interestingly, I'm saying that Groom and West write it all. Well, West isn't in the band at this stage. So the songwriting's Carol Groom, Nick Midson on guitar, and John Geary on bass, who was actually the band's original singer before they'd actually released anything. So to me, it's a band finding themselves, but doing a great job of that. And I think there's a little bit of not quite having the Threshold sound yet, but it's a debut album. But it's a phenomenal debut album. And after saying that it's my least favourite out of the 11, songs like Paradox and Surface to Air, I mean, they're as good as anything that's in the catalogue. So that's my number 11. That's where I start. I think that maybe the reason that I've chosen it where it is I'm not sure that Damien Wilson has quite found himself at this stage. And that's, I love him as a singer. I mean, people might know him a bit more recently from Headspace, and he's sang with Rick Wakeman.
Mm-hmm.
And lots of different things, lots of solo stuff too, which is all acoustic and very different to this and very good. But to me here, he's not quite got the sound that he creates later in his career.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you. And I think that, I jumped on board the Threshold train with that debut album. So I think I probably hold it a little bit higher. For me, I've always really liked him in the band.
Yeah.
But again, you've had 3 really good singers in this band, so it's hard to. But I think because he was kind of the guy early on, I've always kind of latched onto Damien Wilson a little bit more than the other 2. But yeah, what are you going to do? I'm going to start with my number 11. I'm going to go with 1998's Clone.
Right.
Again, a very good album. It's the first album with Mac on vocals. I think he does a fine job. I think there's a lot of good hooks on this album. Change and Lovelorn, very, very catchy tunes. I think this album is probably one of their more accessible albums, to me anyway. Yeah. The only real fault I can have with this album is I think the production is missing some kind of oomph. It's like the production is a little light, not a lot of heft to the guitars, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. But, my phone is going berserk here.
I think you're spot on with the production, though. That's something I've actually noted down for where it falls on my list. And it has been remixed and it has been reissued, and it does make it better. But I think it shows a fundamental flaw with the album in that even all of that extra work doesn't fix it.
Yeah,
it just doesn't have the presence that most, if not all, other Threshold albums have. So yeah, I can totally see where you're coming from on that.
Yeah.
So for me, now it's interesting because we're saying they're all good albums, and I must admit that this is one of these. I started ranking these albums, and there is a little bit of eras that it falls into for me. Probably different reasons for that. So in 10, I've got, this is 1997's Extinct Instinct. So this is Damien Wilson's second album with a band, if I'm correct. He did the first, then he left, Glenn Morgan came in, and then he did the third. All very confusing. He went away and did stage work, in actual fact. He sang in musicals and various things like that. And it's Richard West kind of takes over the songwriting at this stage. He's a little bit more involved. I think this is Damien Wilson's arguably his best vocal performance with a band, but it's maybe too good. You're laughing. What I mean by that is he sings too well. I don't quite feel he's got enough gruffness on it. I can kind of feel that what he's been doing lately is more kind of being on the stage and doing shows and things like that, rather than being in a rock band.
He's more refined now, I think, in his older age. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. So it's a great album. Eat the Unicorn probably stands out for me. I must admit, and this is quite poor, okay, but the artwork puts me off a little bit. Is that it just doesn't feel like a Threshold album in that sense, and it's not got the logo. I like a logo, so
yes.
So there's reasons for that. Sometimes you don't always just connect with the songs that are on it in that sense, but so it's a really good album, but it's not one I go back to very often, I have to say.
Yeah, and I can talk about it more when it comes up on my list, but I think out of all of the albums that we're going to talk about today, that's perhaps the only one that approaches kind of near Dream Theater territory for me. And I don't think the production of that album is great. It's good. It's not great. But yeah, as much as I love Damien Wilson on those first couple of releases, I agree with, I think he became much more refined and sure of himself. And he took on like a really classy kind of style later on in his career, specifically on these later Threshold albums, whereas he's pretty raw on those early ones. But still, the talent was there, though.
Well, the guy can sing. There's no doubt. And he can do it live, too. I've only seen Threshold once. He was singing with them, and he covered all eras of the band. Absolutely fantastic.
Very cool.
Really
Needless to say, they never come here to tour.
They don't play here very often either. Threshold are a European band in terms of where they're big. So when they play a European tour, this English band usually play one date in the UK. So I travelled to the south of England from the middle of Scotland to go and see it. It was a 3-day festival, and they were the main reason. Them and, I can't even remember who it was, the other band, but there was 2 bands that made me go. They headlined one of the days, and they were outstanding. It's the only time I've seen them, probably is going to be the only time I see them, to be honest, because I don't think they'll ever play up here.
Yeah, it's a shame.
It is.
My number 10, I'm going to go 1994, Psychedelic Tessin.
Yep.
First down with Lynn Morgan on vocals. Again, another fine album. Into the Light, very strong song. Sunseeker, Devoted, Under the Sun. I mean, it's a good album, good vocal performance. I guess for some people, this constant change in singers might be a little off-putting, but I think the quality from album to album just never really suffered. I'm not a huge fan of the album cover art. It's okay, I guess. I guess it makes a point. I don't know, whatever. but I do like this album. I feel bad putting it so low. Well, there you have it. You're right in line.
Well, it's my number 9 as well, and I'll agree the artwork isn't outstandingly good. You can see what they're trying to do, but I don't think it's executed remarkably well. Yeah, I mean, Glenn Morgan's good on it. There's a bit more harshness about this album. There's a bit more of a signpost about where they're going to go. I mean, this is the second album. This is 1994. So it's interesting that it comes between the first 2 that I've got there, the 2 Damien Wilson early ones. And you do wonder who some of these songs were written for. I don't think the intention was to go between singers. I mean, obviously, the intention wasn't to go between singers, but I wonder if this was all written for Steven Wilson at this stage. What brought them back to him, I don't know. So was Glenn Morgan just a stopgap? Hard to know. But that's maybe the thing for me. But I think he, in some ways, signposts what's to come in kind of the middle part of what the band are. And that's an interesting point, but it's not that he doesn't quite hit it. The songs and him don't quite gel in the same way as the later ones do for me. And interestingly, I've written down Sunseekers and Into the Light. That's the same two tracks that you mentioned to start with as well. So
Yeah, I mean, those are really good. Yeah, and
as a
you make a
all-rounded
good point. I wonder if that album was written with Damien in mind, and then he's gone, and let's just get another guy to fill in here who maybe was trying to hit those notes that he's really not, capable of doing or whatever.
Yeah, I would say they're possibly the two most different singers out of the three. I think that Glyn has elements of Mark, and I think that Stephen has elements of Mark and vice versa. And I think that that's maybe the one that would have been the most difficult jump if that's what they were trying to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, all right, my number 9 is Wounded Land, the debut.
Right, okay. Yep.
Again, raw Damien Wilson here. Some good songs, though. Siege of Baghdad, terrific tune. Consumed to Live, I always liked a lot. Paradox, Surfaced Air, a lot of really long songs on here.
Yeah.
I think this kind of, when this first came out, if you were a fan of Dream Theater from those first 2 albums, you think, great, another really cool, progressive metal band on the scene, although very different. But I listened to this a lot back in the day. Listening to it now, it's just amazing how much they have kind of evolved into a very refined and classy band. Not that this isn't, but it's different. It's definitely different. Yeah. They definitely sound like a younger band there.
Yes, I agree. That's a very good way of putting it. Very good way of putting it. So for me, from there, well, I jumped forward quite a bit. So Psychedelic Test was 1984, so we've been early 90s all the way through. So my number 8 is, with a nice shiny fancy cover here that's reflecting everything else in my room, is Dead Reckoning.
Wow.
So this is from 2007. I mean, and we've said it all the way through. This is a great album. So this was the last one with Mark, who is sadly no longer with us. And he left the band under a little bit of a cloud. He basically ditched them just as we're about to go on tour. He sent them a message to say that he wasn't prepared to pack his job in anymore. His girlfriend was working 2 jobs and he was passing up opportunities and all these things, and they had a tour booked and they couldn't go, hence maybe why they phoned Steven Wilson and said, "Are you free?" And interestingly, I forget which member of the band it was that said it, but the reason it was Steven Wilson and Glenn Morgan that they phoned.
You mean Damien Wilson?
Sorry. Steven Wilson. I've done that a few times, haven't I? That tells you how much I like Steven Wilson. There you go. Wow, that's bad, isn't it? There you go. But the reason that they phoned Damien Wilson and not Glenn Morgan was because they had Damien Wilson's phone number. That was the difference. He actually said after Damien Wilson was back in the band, it could easily have been Glenn, which I thought was a little bit of an odd thing to say, but there you go. So the thing for me with Dead Reckoning is it's maybe too heavy for Threshold. I think it's their heaviest album. I think it's their rawest album. I think it's, in some ways, it's the only album that I feel, other than maybe right at the very start, where they scene chased a little bit. Dan Swano's on there, and there's a bit of growling vocals, which I quite like, to be fair. I quite like something that's a bit more extreme. He growls on Slipstream right at the very start of the album. I think that's brilliant because it's just a few lines here and there, and it just adds a bit of punctuation, which is an excellent, counterbalance to some really good vocals that are going on. But then he growls again on the song Elusive, and it feels a bit like, everyone's doing it, we should be doing it too. And it's not that it lost me a little bit. I just felt that it felt a bit uncomfortable. It didn't feel like it was what they really wanted to be doing.
Well, because they'd never been that kind of band to follow trends, basically, right? And let's be real, that we're talking 2007, everybody was doing that. All of a sudden, it was cool to put extreme music or extreme vocals in your music if you were not an extreme band.
Yes.
That was right at that time. So,
So, I mean, I say that, but then Pilot in the Sky of Dreams, that's possibly one of my favourite songs by this band, and that's on this album. But the interesting thing for me as well is the fancy shiny one that I've got there, the bonus track on that is a cover of Muse's Supermassive Black Holes. And it's just so average. It's unbelievable. I like Muse and I like that song and I like Threshold. And I thought, well, that'll be interesting. Let's listen to that. And you get to the end and you go, oh, why?
That's no good.
Why would you do that? It's almost like they showed up that they shouldn't be doing it. And that to me, it felt a bit scene chasing. I don't know if, in terms of label, because I think we're Nuclear Blast by that stage, if they kind of said, go and make yourself, I don't know. But I don't connect with it quite as much as I do the rest of the Mark stuff, put it that way.
Cool. Yeah, it's definitely a heavy album. I agree with you there. All right, my number eight's going to go one you've already shown, Extinct Instinct from '97. Damien Wilson back in the band. Good album. I agree with you. Crappy packaging. This
Yep.
is actually very indicative of the Giant Electric Pea stuff from that time period. I had an
Yep.
issue with a lot of the packaging on a lot of albums that came from this label. Music is good. I dig the album. You know, Eat the Unicorn, like you mentioned, Exposed is good. Life Flow I like a lot. Part of the Good Chaos is actually really good too.
Yep.
Again, band's kind of still, trying to figure it out. I think it's a very fine album. A lot of good proggy parts on here, which I dig. So, but it's good. I just think that the early part of the career is very solid, but they would just continue to get way better. That just one of those. Hold on. 1 second here. Hold on. Hopefully my wife is out there. There we go. Cool. It's the wonders from taping at home. It's like phones ringing, dogs barking, all that kind of stuff.
Well, at some point you'll hear the rain on my window above me. I'm sure. I'm in Scotland. It rains.
It rains. There you go. All right, back to you, I guess. So where are we at? We're at number 7.
I'm at number 7. And we're not too far apart on most of this so far, because my number 7 is Clone. So this is Mac's debut with a band. And he did bring a natural, harsher edge to things. I think he's possibly the, no pun intended, unsung singer of progressive metal. Because really, I mean, he did other things with Power World and Yargos, but nothing that ever got much of a name, nothing that really kind of broke through. So if you haven't heard Threshold, I'm sure that you won't actually be aware of him at all. And I think that's a real shame. He's got great clarity, but he's got a bit of harshness in his voice, amazing power. And this was the first album. This is 1998. This is the band's 4th album. And this was the first one to me that really you thought, yeah, this is Threshold. This is where it's going. And it's a little bit different, but there was so much more to come. And to me, there's something that were really setting trends now with this album. And I think that Goodbye Mother Earth is possibly the one that signposted what was to come.
Yep. I hear you. I agree. Mac may be kind of like, of the 3 vocalists, he's probably like the MVP guy, because I think he's actually sang on some of their strongest albums.
Yep.
I still think I like Damien better as a singer, but that's just me. But Mac was great. He was really great in this band. And I think if you look at the kind of the rest of my rankings here, well, at least the next few, it just kind of solidifies that. So I'm going to go, I have a couple that I don't actually own. Steven and I were talking about beforehand, looking through my stacks to go pull out all their albums. I was like, why am I missing a couple of these? It's because, in the age of reviewing digital product and stuff, you review and listen to all these, but then unless you go out and buy them on your own, or remember to, you realize later on, it's like, I actually don't have a couple of these. So my next one on the list for number 7 is 2004's Subsurface. Another really strong album, another very, very, enjoyable Mac album. I have like a couple of them in a row here that they're almost impossible to kind of separate. They're all jam-packed with music. And I think Threshold is one of those bands, I've talked about this before, who they give you their all with every release, and they're going to fill all 70, 79 minutes of every CD, right, with music, which at times, thankfully, they don't put out an album a year, which I think is a good thing. And I think,
I watched the Rant video, and I agree. I think that filling a CD isn't always a good thing. I think that progressive metal can, more often than not, can cope with it, because you tend to find that bands hopefully are adding a whole lot of different flavors and elements throughout those sort of albums.
Yeah, it's not so much against the prog metal bands, because I think, Threshold, Vanden Plas, Symphony X, Dream Theater, Circle.
I went to see that at that festival. Thank you. There you go.
Which one?
Vanden Plas.
Okay, gotcha. But they're just as guilty of putting out 75-minute albums time and time again. But yeah, I agree with you. I tend to have a little bit more, what's the word I'm looking for? I can deal with a little better on some of these prog metal releases, but they're sometimes because it's not like you have 5 tracks and 3 of them are 20 minutes long, right? You've got, they're all consistently 7, 8, 9, 10 minutes long, and you get about a half a dozen or maybe 8 of them. But Threshold, they pack them in every single release. So you got to spend some time with these albums.
Yeah, to get to know them.
Thankfully, well, there's some of them they released. So like 2001, 2002, 2004, 2007. So they're a little bit spaced out. It's not like they hit you one every year, because I think if they were releasing an album in a year, I'd be like, I'd get lost after a while.
It's not like the 70s when they were doing 2 a year. Put it that
right,
way.
exactly, yeah.
I don't think I would know many albums very well if everyone was doing that now. There you go. So
yeah.
number 6.
Okay.
And I'm in 2014. So I'm on For the Journey. This is Damien Wilson's last album with a band, and I would happily predict that it will be his final album with the band, because they didn't part on great terms. The band seemed to want to pass it off as they did, and Damien Wilson was more than happy to come out and suggest that they didn't. It's a real shame for me, because I love him, I love the band, and I think they've done some phenomenal work together, and it was a shame to see it end in that manner. And I think that it, in some ways, that maybe shows on this album. I mean, we're still at number 6 here, so we're very high up in the list, but I do kind of wonder if the chemistry wasn't quite where it maybe should have been at that stage. But then again, it's a great album, it has to be said. Watchtower, On the Moon, Siren Sky, there's a slow and brooding stuff here. It's an atmospheric album. I think now, I mean, it's called For the Journey, but Threshold to me are writing albums. They're not writing songs and placing them together, they're writing albums. That's something that shows maybe a little bit later as well, when they start to play around with concept ideas. They don't really ever do a full-blown concept album, but they do play about with those sort of ideas. So this to me there's a little bit of compromise about this album, but more in terms of, I think it's maybe more about the flow than it is sometimes about having a couple of killer tracks on there. And that's what maybe gets me, is I think it's a great album to sit down and listen to, start to finish. I'm not sure that I sing some of the songs afterwards, and for a progressive metal band, you usually can sing quite a lot of Threshold songs.
Yeah, that's the one thing for me that I think has always separated Threshold albums from, let's say, Symphony X and Dream Theater albums. Yep. I don't find their albums filled with hooks like those two bands. Yep. It's not to say that there's not memorable and melodic stuff on them, because they're filled with them, right?
Yep.
But they're not that kind of band. They never were. I don't think they're ever going to be.
No, I hope they're not to some extent, because I think that's one of the things that makes them stand out.
Right. And you are right. They are an album band. You listen to a Threshold album. My next one is a perfect example of that. Hypothetical from 2001, another great Mac album.
Yep.
You got to listen to these albums from start to finish. They're taken as a whole. You don't like pull out, oh yeah, that one track, boom, amazing. Love the hook in that. Love the guitar solo in that. It's got this great kind of like jammy middle. All that kind of, they're not that kind of band at all.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
You know, it's just one good song after another, and the album makes an impact on you as a whole, or it doesn't.
Yeah, I would agree with that. That they're an immersive band. I think you've got to build. I like bands that you have to give some time to. Don't get me wrong, I like a hook, I like a pop song, and I'll sing along, and I've got lots of music like that, but I do love a band that you've got to kind of give yourself to, that you've got to admit that sometimes you put it on the first time and you think, yeah, okay, and it's not until maybe you're on the 4th or 5th listen before you start to think, right, okay, beginning to really get it now.
And you know what kind of just came to mind? I think the latter period Iron Maiden material is another perfect example of this. Again, big difference from the early part of their catalog. The early part of their catalog, you had all these standout tracks. It's like, oh yeah, everybody's got their favorites. Whereas the more recent Maiden catalog, they're very much albums. And you have to kind of take them as a whole.
Let's not go off too much on a tangent. I must admit, I can't connect with Latter Day Maiden at all. I just can't do it. I think Brave New World was the last album and that, to be fair, is maybe more instant. Maybe says more about me than it does them. I think that what Maiden have done personally, and people will be up in arms on this one, okay, I know that's coming. Well,
there's two camps though, there's someone who's going to say exactly what you're going to say, and then there's the other
corner. The best band to get in, give you one of them and just slap you about the chops a bit and just leave you stunned. But then they did Rime of the Ancient Mariner. So there was proof that they could go in there and do an epic and fill 20 minutes worth of song and still have those moments where you hooked you in and grabbed you and shook you about. And I just can't be grabbed or shaken by any of the last 3 or 4 albums, to be honest. And as I say, there will be people aghast at that, but I really, really struggle with the latter, the output. But I do get the point.
Yeah, but a lot of the Threshold albums are kind of like that. That's my opinion. It's again, songs are generally at least 5-6 minutes long, sometimes 10. Very rarely you see a 3 or 4 minute long Threshold song. So it's like you got to, just like with the Maiden stuff, you got to invest the time. You got to take the album as a whole. This is not go on Spotify and stream a couple tunes. It just doesn't work that way with this band, right?
No, it doesn't. As I say, you've got to be willing to invest a little bit of time. They've invested, I think, a lot of time in creating these albums, and I think that you've got to put that a little bit of effort in.
Yeah. Yeah, if you're that type of listener, yeah, absolutely.
But man, oh man, do you get the rewards?
Yeah,
that's the thing.
All right, number 5, back to you.
Number 5 is March of Progress. Okay, so this is, I think, Damon Wilson coming back into the band. It is very confusing for anyone that doesn't know much about Threshold. It is very confusing. He's had 3 goes, and this was the one that followed Dead Reckoning, if my memory serves. We're at 2012, we're at the 9th album now, and this kind of, to me, proved almost that they could do heavy, but without having to add the growls and the gimmicks and various things like this. And there's just not a weak moment on here. I think Wilson is amazing on this album. I think this is possibly his strongest vocal with them. I think he's maybe been even better with Headspace, personally, but that's, same again, maybe just more an evolution and he's even more comfortable with what he's doing. But I mean, there's songs like Ashes, Liberty, Complacency, Dependency. Just this is stunning. I can't find much in the way of weakness on here, it has to be said. And when we're at number 5, and that tells you all that needs to know that an album I'm giving that sort of praise to falls roughly in the middle.
Yeah,
great, really good.
And we'll talk more about that in a couple of minutes. Yeah. 2002's Critical Mass, another Mac album, another very solid record. Echoes of Life, great tune. Round and Round, Phenomenon. Fragmentation, very cool tune, I think. And then you got of course the big title track, right, to finish it all off. These guys didn't always do these like massive epics, and I think for them a 13-minute long track, that's probably about as epic as they go. They have a lot of like kind of 9, 10, 11-minute long songs, but I just think this is another pretty terrific effort from the band. And Mac just kind of killing it over and over and over and over again.
Yeah, I mean, I think a massive compliment to the band is that when you tend to sit and do these, it's usually reasonably obvious, maybe the 1 or 2 that you're not so keen on. I think it's usually reasonably obvious the 1 or 2 that you adore. You think that's obviously my 1 and 2. And then the middle stuff can be quite difficult to sort through and put an order in. But I'll be honest and say that from number 4 onwards for me, I think on a different day of the week I could have put these in a different order. And I actually didn't put them in the order I thought I would when I before I sat down to listen to them all again, just to refamiliarise myself with some albums that I've listened to a lot over the years, but maybe not quite so much in the last couple of months, So number 4 for me is Legends of the Shire. So this is the band's most recent album. This is 2017. This is Glenn Morgan's 3rd go with the band. For anyone who is paying attention, thank you. But more importantly, you'll be wondering, well, how can this be his 3rd? Because where's the 2nd one? Well, the 2nd period with the band was he only sang some singles or some songs on a singles box set called Paradox, which he's very good on. But I was concerned, to be honest. I mean, I love Mac's vocals. Damon Wilson, to me, was just hitting his stride and doing some great stuff for the band. And to go back to someone who's really not done very much outside of this band, the band's comments themselves at the time were that they couldn't imagine having a 4th singer. Now that's putting pressure on themselves because they're going to have to stick with Glenn now, But they kind of felt that it would be a bit Spinal Tap with the drummers. They thought, 4 singers, 11 albums going into 12 albums if they get a 4th singer. Can't we really take ourselves seriously? As I say, that's putting a lot of pressure on themselves because now if they do split, what do they do?
And on him as well. And on Glenn as well.
Absolutely. And I was concerned because you think, can he come in after really not doing very much for a long, long time and hit it well? And this is the album that possibly more obvious than any other, you realise that it's not the singer that's writing the vocal harmonies. And I don't mean that disparagingly against Glenn. What I'm actually meaning by that is what a great job he does of coming in and doing exactly what Threshold need. He is a little bit harsher. He is a little bit rawer, but man, oh man, does he hit the nail on the head. And this is a double album, okay? So
Yeah.
you're not seeing that really in the light that I've got here. So we're not just filling the CD, we're up to 80 plus minutes now on this one. So it's not two crammed discs that you've got here, but I think they realised that they wanted to, there's a story here, there's a concept. I will say that Legends from the Shire were not in the Lord of the Rings. Okay, I like the Lord of the Rings, I like a bit of Tolkien, but I don't know if I need, when I'm in my 40s, to have bands writing about, many orcs and elves and things like that. Sorry, Ronnie James Dio, I do love him. But I was worried when I heard that title. I thought, oh, really? A band of that stature is going, but they're not. This is about a land and a country kind of finding itself and being self-sufficient, and what happens in a land that is, just a working land more than anything else. But there's supposedly deeper meanings and different concepts, and the band have steadfastly refused to go back and kind of explain too much about it, which I can't quite like. Not always do like, but yeah. So this is a really phenomenal album, and this is possibly the one that strikes me as, even though there's two discs here, it's start to finish. It's a whole album. There's a story, there's a theme, there's a flow. We revisit some themes here, so you do have the title track actually running through it 3 times, and it's a very complete album. Very, very good. And John Geary, the original bassist and singer, also does a wee guest appearance on it too. So for long-term fans, there's lots and lots of little things to get excited about here. But really good album. Really good.
And really good production on it too, I might add.
Yeah. I mean, Carol Groom's in demand now for his production work. So
yeah. All right. So my number 4, you've already discussed, The Last with Mac, Dead Reckoning.
Yep.
Like you said, easily their heaviest album. Trying a couple different things on here. I dig it. I think it's big, it's in your face. I think when it came out, I was kind of like, whoa, Threshold ready to play with the big boys, right? But I still think it's really enjoyable. Slipstream is classic, Hollow, Fighting for Breath, Safe to Fly. I dig it. Good album. Yeah. Good album.
So I am at number 3. I'm at Hypothetical. Okay. So this is where I came in. This is the first Threshold album that I bought. I must admit that I wasn't really aware of them up until this stage at all. So, I mean, 5th album, 2001. Mac's in absolutely imperious form here. As I say, anyone who loves a singer who can really handle progressive metal needs to hear Mac with Threshold. The guy's, for me, has got it all. It's just, I mean, there's so much on this album. Light and Space. We've spoken before about opening an album with a great song. This is how to open an album. I mean, the sounds, it swirls from the headphone, side to side, it pans and immediately pulls you in, and you're going somewhere special. And I absolutely love this album, I have to say. And this was the one that surprised me that it couldn't break into the top 2 when I went back and listened to everything again, because this was a real eye-opener for me. This kind of made me realise that there was an awful lot more bands out there that weren't getting the coverage, that weren't getting the hype. And it's just one name we've not mentioned, and that's Johan James. So that's the drummer. Wow. The man's outstanding. And having seen him live once, just absolutely phenomenal. I mean, he's dexterous. He can play. The double kick stuff that he's capable of doing is just out of this world. But he's got touch and he's got tone, and yeah, can't say enough about him. It fascinates me that the guys in this band are not in demand for that kind of session circuit where people are desperate to get great players on their albums and add a few names and say, Johan James of Threshold. Why are these guys not getting that sort of push? It fascinates me. Disappoints me a little bit, to be honest. But, great album. Love it.
Yep. I like it. It's a good one. All right. We're at 3, right?
Yep.
2014, For the Journey.
Yep.
Okay. The last go around with Mr. Wilson is also a really strong one. This one came out, I believe this was Nuclear Blast on your side of the world, Metalville Records here. Watchtower on the Moon.
Yeah.
Quite good. The Mystery Show, Turn to Dust, The Box. And it sounds great. This is I think the 2 last albums with Damien, and even the recent one, have great productions. And I think what I like is Carl's guitars sound better on some of these more recent albums than some of the earlier ones. Remember, I think one of the things I've always wanted from Threshold is a little more crunch on his guitar from the production. And I think a lot of the kind of 90s albums, little thin in that department, but that has not been the case on any of the more recent ones, like over the last like decade or so. So for coming in pretty high for me at number 3.
So number 2, and I'm at Subsurface is where I'm at. Okay, so this is 2004. This is the band's 7th album. This, to me, it's interesting because Dead Reckoning, if I remember correctly, followed. So this explores a heavier sound. It's maybe a little bit more in your face, not quite as nuanced as the band can be, but it doesn't take the step that, for me, slightly too far that Dead Reckoning does. And this just has a real balance about it. There's a lot of tender moments on this album. There's a lot of emotion on this album, but when it wants to go for the throat, it's capable of going for the throat. Mission Profile, Stop Dead, Flags and Footprints, Static. I'm almost naming the whole album here. And then interestingly, What About Me? And that was written by Johan James, the drummer. And whether, and I may be labouring the point here a little bit, but whether that goes back to the interesting comments I made about who writes the songs from other members of the band, because you tend to find that when the other guys get to write a song, it's only a bonus track. So whether that's the bone being thrown, you know, we do love you really. I don't know, but
it won't be on the regular album. But we'll throw it on as a bonus track on the digipack or whatever, right?
Case thing, yeah, absolutely. But to me, the interesting thing is that some of the bonus tracks on these albums are really good, and you do wonder if maybe they could have added a bit more of that to it. But at the same time, I love what's on there, so they know better than I do. Do you know?
Yeah, exactly.
Really strong album. Really strong album.
And I do want to make mention too, a lot of these album covers that we're showing from their more recent, you know, the post-2000 catalog.
Yep.
What a difference. I mean, these are beautiful album covers.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm looking at some of these. I mean, come on, this is like, it's gorgeous, you know, but as opposed to the early ones.
And they convey the atmosphere of what's on the album really well.
Yeah.
I love it when you look at an album cover when you're listening to the music and it makes sense. And they make sense.
Yeah, well, I mean, let's be real. I think that Nuclear Blast and Inside Out record, they know
they do
how to appeal to the audience. That's just, you know, it's the way it is. My number 2 is another one I do not own, March of Progress from 2012, the return of Damian Wilson. I think it's a terrific record.
Yep.
It sounds huge. The songs are great. I mean, Ashes and Starting at the Sun. I mean, these are really, really good songs, classic songs. And it was just a great return for him. And I think I agree with you. If you listen to that album and the For the Journey album and compare them to Wounded Land and Extinct Instinct, very different singer. I mean, you still know it's Damian Wilson, but he has matured so well. And it's been kind of cool, like kind of seeing him along this ride from the very beginning. And he's appeared in other various projects and things like that, obviously. But really good. So that's my number 2. I was really up in arms about my number 1 and number 2, and I could flip-flop at any time, but I'm going to stick with my number 1 for today. Like I said, you ask me this next week, I might change my mind and have it be March of Progress, but I'm going to stick with my number 1.
Yeah, as I said, my top 4 I could probably do that with. I could probably interchange them. Definitely my top 3. So my number 1 is 2002's Critical Mass. I just think this album's huge. It's just got so much heft, and I worry when I say that people think that we're moving into something really, really heavy here, but I don't think it does. But the interesting thing for me is there's an awful lot of progressive metal guitarists out there that are massively talented. They can burn up and down the fretboard. They can, you know, churn out some amazing riffs. But you listen to a Threshold album, you immediately know who the band is. The riffs have a distinct kind of sound to them without sounding
There's
generic.
a texture there that a lot of bands don't get.
Yeah, and that's a really clever thing to be able to do. And that says a lot about Carl Groom and how he can both play the guitar but also create the sounds on the album. I agree. The production becomes stronger, even more so after kind of this middle era. But at this stage, I mean, you can be seconds into a Threshold album. You could go in blind and know it's them. And I don't think there's too many progressive metal bands outside of the really big boys who are setting the scene that you could say that you could listen to just snippets and immediately know that's who it is. But I mean, the songwriting on this album for me just absolutely hits the nail on the head. It's quite evenly split between Groom and West. But you've got Fragmentation, as you say, the three-part Critical Mass is just outstanding. And then the bonus tracks on here, Do Unto Them, which was written by Mark, and New Beginnings, written by Nick Midson. I really like these as well. And I think they set what the band were going to be from here on in. But it just hits the nail. And John Jerry, yet again, he's back again. A lot of guys come and go from this band. There's a little bit, I kind of view them as a bit, I don't know, a bit like a family to some extent, you know, so lots of ins and outs and various things like that. But this, to me, if you love your progressive metal, I would definitely say Critical Mass should be in your collection.
I agree. It's a good one. It's came pretty high up on mine too. So, so my number one, there's probably some folks who are going to be like, I can't believe Pardo picked the most recent one as his number one. And I debated as well. That's why I said, you know what, should I put March of Progress as number one or as number two? But, you know, man, Legend of the Shires, this album impressed the hell out of me. You know, you got Glenn Morgan back. It sounds huge. It's epic. It's got the production you love from this band. Mix of long songs and shorter songs. It's got a cool story. You know, all sorts of great tunes on here. I don't know. I fell in love with this album, and his vocals sound totally different than it did way back when on Psychedelic Test. And I think that was the important thing. I think now he kind of figured out exactly how he needs to sing in this band. It's no longer, I'm going to be filling someone's shoes, maybe for just a short period of time, right? But The Man Who Saw Through Time, you know, Small Dark Lines. I mean, so many great tunes on here. Stars and Satellites, just, and you can just kind of tell, you know, you look at the guys, they seem pretty sure of themselves. They seem pretty confident, and they're like, this is now the new Threshold going forward.
Yeah,
I mean, we'll see if that turns out to be the case, right? But
they've had gigs and shows and various things in recent times. Obviously, everything's been cancelled as of late. However, there hasn't been much noise in the way of new music or anything like that. Carl is so in demand for his, you know, his talents in making other bands sound fantastic. That maybe in a good way gets in the way. Because as you say, I don't know if I want a Threshold album every year. You know, who doesn't want more good music? But at the same time, I think you need to kind of go away from their albums and come back, and go away and come back. And they're one of those bands that I don't think, even the early stuff, I don't think I come back to it now and think, you know, it's not quite got the same impact. I think all of their albums either at least still have the same amount of impact that they did once you got to know them, or they still get better now. Some of these albums I hadn't listened to for a wee while before I came to write this list. I was amazed by how strong this canon of work is. It really is very impressive, very impressive.
Absolutely. So for those of you watching out here who have not kind of taken the dive into the world of Threshold, I think you really can't go wrong with any 11 of them. I think, judging by both how Steven and I kind of rank these, I think that your safest bet to explore the band from the beginning is to listen to the more recent material. And more recent, I mean post 2000. I think you really can't go wrong with any of those. But they're all really strong. I just think the last 5 or 6 albums are just really polished, really professional. It's just so well done, so well produced. You really can't go wrong. Again, just you're not getting a Dream Theater clone here by any means.
No,
these guys are very different.
Bigger.
Yeah.
So lots of great progressive music out there. It's always kind of fascinated me that Threshold, maybe because they are a UK progressive metal band, there just isn't a scene for it here. As I say, I'm in Scotland and we get lots of good gigs up here. We're very fortunate. But progressive metal, it just doesn't sell up here at all. So the fact that they have to kind of ship themselves off to, you know, the Netherlands and Germany to go and play 5 or 6 dates in one country and kind of build up that audience must make it difficult for guys who are obviously not based there.
Yeah.
But they just have never quite broken through with the big boys of the scene, and I really think that they deserve it. They really do.
Yeah, and they haven't done it here either. So it's got to be tough. You know, they have their fans here, but for them to come all the way over here to tour, it just doesn't make sense financially speaking. So, and we don't have festivals here, right? So I'm pretty sure, if I'm not mistaken, I think that they played at one of the Prague Powers, if I'm not mistaken, at some point in time.
They did.
Right?
Yeah.
But that was probably like a million years ago. So
who knows who was singing with them then? Somebody
It'll
will.
be worth some research, I guess. I
I'm
don't know.
sure somebody will. Somebody will tell us below, and I'll look forward to reading it.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
So there you guys have it. Ranking the studio albums of Threshold, great UK progressive metal band. I want to thank Steven Reid for coming on the show once again to help us out with this ranking.
Such a great band.
He's coming right back because he's actually going to do all by himself a ranking of the Wild Hearts. I'll be sitting here, of course, as well. And then he and I are going to do our top 10 songs listing of the band Europe. Great Swedish hard rock band. So we're doing that as well together. So stay tuned for that. Visit us on the web at www.seatranquility.org. We're on Facebook. We're on Twitter. Of course, we're here on YouTube all the damn time. Stay tuned. We'll be back in a bit. Take care.